Welcome to the Nausea River podcast. I'm Theo Morgan, and there's something about Finnish metal, isn't there? This one's very first draft. I've been busy this week, but it's been weighing on my mind a lot. How do suburban teenagers find metal anyways? I've never had peers to ask while I was figuring it out for myself. I was confined to the internet for the first couple years of my journey, becoming the protege of college students who were more established as metalheads. They had been interested in the genre for years at that point. A lot of them had learned an instrument or even been in bands, and only a few were creepy towards a random teenage girl. My question to them wasn't how, it was always, what do you recommend? And inevitably it was Demolick and the Chasm, 9 times out of 10. At least they had some taste. Excellent bands. Before that, I was convinced that Coldplay was the devil's work, and it wasn't a comment on their quality as artists. For a while I tried to believe it too, but I couldn't resist the siren song of secular music forever. I feared the dizzying hum of a guitar plugged into an amp, but craved it like it was my next meal. One day I'd fear it, the next I'd find 5 ways to justify the White Stripes as a thoroughly neutral force for my soul. One day it's late 2007 and you're 13 years old. You're trapped in your emotions, feeling unable to enjoy anything and definitely not looking forward to Christmas. You then hear Nemo by Nightwish because its lyrics were used in a fanfic you liked. It's a beautiful song with a snowy piano-forward lead, and the guitar used more for heaviness and texture than melody, with one solo in the middle. And the music video focuses on the beautiful face of Tarja Turunen, back in her mid-20s at that, but that's just a bonus. It's super overplayed now, the most popular song of a popular artist after all, but it changed everything for me back then. You then listen to Once and Dark Passion play the whole way through, you work backwards through discography. You look deeper into the genre of symphonic metal and the output of their fellow countrymen, and eventually you come out the other side as a metal podcaster with parents who, at least now, desperately try to understand you. It's fun hearing everyone else's stories because they're usually more pleasant, like instead of overcoming the fear of God and getting your brain fried in the sticky grease of online metalhead discourse, your uncle took you to see Metallica when you were 8. You had an older brother torment you with Morbid Angel, but you secretly enjoyed it. Or, God forbid, you had friends you'd window shop with at Hot Topic, or you had a crush on a pimple-faced Slipknot fan when you were 14 and you just had to impress him. Then, let me be clear, any crush I had came after I got into metal. All of this to say, 2000s metal nostalgia is strong now that all of us are becoming old and withered, and yes, I am counting new metal as part of the family now on a case-by-case basis, but let's get closer together, shall we? In between the large tours for Korn and Deftones this year and beyond, and new bands bring back the funk-inspired bass lines of new metal, there's a nostalgic look across the pond, too. The people whose alternative-tinged adolescence in the 2000s was defined by having a big old crush on Ville Valo or Tarja Turunen, possibly both. Some of their associated bands benefited, too. I otherwise wouldn't have seen Daniel Lioneye CDs sold at Newberry Comics. A motley collection of metalheads, mall goths, skater kids, and otakus. I can mention Children of Bodom to a Hot Topic regular and get a knowing nod. One of my normie friends who plays ukulele is a huge Insomnium fan. I mentioned the band Tarot to a bunch of tabletop gaming nerds at a New Year's party. 2 of them ended up being casual listeners. And I got to add Wings of Darkness to the playlist. Only time I was ever allowed to do that. Like, I spent years trying to import their albums to the US and gave up. What the hell happened there? When I say there's something about Finnish metal, I mean it. Okay, so I lied about one thing. I'm not a huge hymn fan. They're fine, and I would like Ville Valo to read me bedtime stories, but back then I was pretty smug about listening to music more cerebral than self-proclaimed love metal. I mean, once I got into Nightwish, I associated with the Nightwish fans who thought everything post-Wishmaster was trash, the kinds of people who were happy to recommend 20 European power metal bands at a time back when I wanted to get into that. I both agreed with them about Nightwish's output and secretly enjoyed their whole discography anyways. They came across a winning formula early on and largely stuck with it, even if they added a full orchestra and subtracted the good power metal riffs. It's music made for the winter, but not the staticky, gray, miserable days of it. I mean, Finland has plenty of those after all. And as I close my eyes and picture myself in a warm cabin, curled up with a shitty drip coffee and watching the snow fall by my lonesome, I realize I don't have to listen to a Nightwish album for any of that. Finland has a lot to offer, too. Some of this was prompted by Amorphous playing at the Middle East in Cambridge this Friday, as of recording this. I am recording this on Thursday, October 3rd, 2024, for all the time travelers listening in, and they are playing October 4th. And I'm going, obviously. I don't think someone can say that they're really intrigued by Finnish metal and then skip on Amorphous. If Finnish metal is wintry, passionate, and melodic, then the Kalevala-themed progressive folk melodeath band are the peak of it all, and yet they are somehow less popular than I expected. But then I came to realize that Finnish metal is still niche in the mainstream consciousness, just because Nightwish booked the Songus Arena a couple years ago and I used to hear Apocalyptica's worst songs in WAAF. Doesn't mean that Finland is producing international sensations left and right either. My parents have heard about Amorphous, but it's because I simply refuse to shut up about them. Booking the Middle East downstairs is a legendary status in a genre that gets relegated to even smaller clubs and bars, but I will have pegged Amorphous as at least a Paradise-level headliner because they get so much attention. Within metal, a world that I have trouble taking my head out of, they seem that popular. Signed to Nuclear Blast and somehow always in the conversation. A band a lot of people love and almost no one seems to truly hate. Perhaps not the most popular Finnish metal band, but the most Finnish of popular metal bands. Let me put it in perspective. Love the website or hate it, the Metal Archive still catalogs the biggest collection of metal bands on the internet. When the site launched in 2002, site admins Morgan and Hellblazer had to make some band, the first they added. Amorphous was that band. Perhaps was owner bias, but still. They encapsulate the meaning of metal to them more than, say, Iron Maiden. Now the theory falls apart when you get to the rest of the list and realize the first entries are mostly from the US and Sweden, but let me have this. Children of Bodom got a page before Iron Maiden. Moonsorrow got one before Judas Priest. I'm not the only person entranced by this country's metal. The foundation was built a while ago. Amorphous have released 14 full-length albums in their career. One might say varying quality, but there's nothing that got universally panned either. I was going to rank them for this episode, but the script wasn't coming together like I wanted it to. I guess to be quick about it, my top few are Tales from the Thousand Lakes, Elegy, and I have a huge soft spot for Silent Waters and Skyforger because I got into Amorphous between those two albums. Far From the Sun and Halo rank last, with Universum not faring much better, but I think a band should be proud of their worst album still being fine. I'd say a 5 or 6 out of 10 for all of those. Are we okay with this? I don't think I made any bold choices here. You wouldn't be hard-pressed to find Elegy fans or anything. Most of the praise has to be down to good songwriting. Amorphous found a winning formula early on, too. A wintry and melodic sound, a good contrast of clean singing and death growls, both of them being high quality, too, and a few eclectic influences as well. Lots of prog rock, session work from saxophonist Sakari Kuko, stuff like that. It still comes together as a cohesive product, an enchanting love letter to Finnish folklore, and possibly the only way their fans would ever know about it. Hey, just a moment. We'll be right back to the episode soon. But are you a musician? Do you work behind the scenes instead, or do you just have a cool story to tell? Nausea River is always looking for interview subjects and guests. I don't bite, and I'm a lot more loose and funny without a script, I promise. Check out our description for our social media and contact info if you're interested. Thanks a ton, and on to the rest of the show. So I started to think about Finnish bands. Some I love and some I don't really listen to that much. The big names are big to me, like Stradivarius and Moonsorrow and Ensiferum, and I guess if we're going to look at who I'll see live in the coming months, good old Swallow the Sun. It's music that's oddly emotional and passionate for a country of frozen-over introverts. I was about to say melancholic, but then I'd be calling Sonata Arctica melancholic or some bullshit like that. It's not afraid to use keyboards, synths, or non-standard instruments. There's some level of storytelling or poeticism, depending on the band. You might hear it in English or Finnish or even Swedish if you're into Fintroll, as you should be. It's extreme to one degree or another, but so catchy you keep coming back. And that way it's the pop music for a peculiar nation. The thesis then came together. The most popular Finnish metal is music you can escape into. It's not foreign enough to scare a bunch of American teenagers, but it's different enough to make you feel special. It's a synth-heavy soundscape that becomes a portal to look into. Some do it for the fantasy. I couldn't become a super fan of Teresa's or Ensiferum or Winter Sun. But you're invited to a world beyond your own. I started wanting those twisted dark escapes instead, like the unending dark room of Unholy or Astral Sleep or Wormphlegm, because they're still more enjoyable than my reality at the time. And of course, the grounded heavy metal of Tarot, maybe my favorite band of all time, despite their flaws. Synth-heavy, but often dead simple. They always write catchy verse-chorus heavy metal songs about power, pain, extraterrestrials, and tolerating the bad shit because there aren't any other options. Oh, and the guitar solos always kick ass. They've played the same game for a while now, despite plenty of breaks, setbacks, and the death of their drummer in 2016. As I mentioned, I had a very hard time finding their music. It took a long time to even find torrents of Tarot's discography. They sing exclusively in English, but always had trouble breaking out of the Finnish market, and even more trouble distributing albums to the US. I guess it left them with a small fan base too loyal to put their music up for grabs. Eventually that changed. I'm really sorry if any of them are listening. I at least could buy Gravity of Light, right? Either way, that was the first band I felt compelled to dig for. Tarot's music was always empowering for me, especially the riff-heavy, almost triumphant vibe. But lyrically, it probably reflected something else for them. Their best album, for the record, is Suffer Our Pleasures. Its most memorable parts are honestly all the keyboard lines. The intro to I Rule, the way they build atmosphere on Rider of the Last Day, the main melody of Pyre of Gods, coming in at the bridge of From the Shadows, even getting a little solo in that song, all that crap. It's an album without a huge overarching concept, but it calls back to falling from grace a lot and accepting that things suck. You'll no longer be cool or worshipped. You'll suffer so much you won't feel the pain anymore, or you'll just die. That's no escape, but shockingly relevant for anyone's whole life. I do not know the guys from Tarot. All the lyrics were written by bassist and singer Marco, and he's never indicated in interviews that he ever got very personal with his lyrics. Granted, he mostly gets asked about his time in Nightwish too, so who knows? In hindsight, I probably felt inspired hearing lyrics that could reach such a dark place, and yet seeing 4 or 5 otherwise well-adjusted middle-aged men behind it, they made it through to the other side, whatever that might mean. Meanwhile, I didn't have good prospects at the time. There are full years I forgot because if I enjoyed it, it was shameful. Neopets as fairies and magic, Avatar The Last Airbender as Eastern philosophy, and Chris Martin of Coldplay is probably a secret druggie, so leave it all behind. Maybe not even for God, but just to impress a bunch of snotty Catholic girls who overuse the word worldly. In the end, I made a tough choice for my own survival, and the dark chasm of metal became a light that saved me. And as it turns out, that chasm is just a tunnel to your escape. Sometimes the end is sticky blood and rotting meat. Sometimes it's watching the northern lights as you succumb to the harsh Finnish winter. Reality, it's more about your boring union job and pile of concert shirts. The thing is, we are all looking for an escape. Me, you, everyone who's been a teenager. I used to make fun of hard rock and nu metal and emo kids for seemingly making up their problems. They're just whiny, well-off suburbanites, unlike me, who was just as well-off and suburban as them, but having actual problems, of course. They even went to mean-spirited places, like thinking that Jonathan Davis of Korn wrote Daddy for shock content, as the subject matter is extremely shocking, instead of it being a real account from his life. That was inexcusable of me. But even beyond serious accusations, life-threatening events, all that nonsense, it sucks being a teenager. You're a dumb kid in a nearly adult body and no one takes you seriously. Even if you're doing okay, you're watching in horror as your friends deeply struggle. I think it's only true to an extent, and it more reflects that people tend to be incurious and content with what they know. But that music you discover as a fresh adolescent carries you through a lot of pain. It's the soundtrack to your escape. That would be a cool In Flames reference if they were Finnish. And if that album didn't blow. So, just to bring more impressionable viewers back to reality here, yes, metal is in fact unusually popular in Finland compared to other countries, and it's not just on calculating the metal bands per capita like you see on those heat maps. You can sometimes see it on the Suomen Virallinen Albumlista, the official albums chart for Finland. As of recording this, Nightwish's Yesterwind is in the number 1 spot, but to be fair, it got close to that in other countries too. There's definitely funny shit like Finland being the country to get Horna in the top 10. Black metal charting is just so fucking funny, but, very well deserved for Horna. Like, honestly, Yesterwind and Nyx were my 2 favorite September releases. You can look at the number one albums of any given year in Finland and see some unexpected champions. I opened 2022 just to research this, and there were weeks where the winner was Sabaton or Arch Enemy. Wikipedia has records going back to 2007 for the Violinen Albumlista. It's not like they're making gore grind and power violence chart, but they'll go crazy for some Opeth, and they'll especially go crazy for their own heavy metal heavy hitters. So, like, Children of Bodom chart, Sonata Arctica chart, stuff like that. And there are other moments. They sent Lordi to Eurovision and won. Singer Ari Koivunen won Idols in 2007 by singing rock and metal songs. Kurosota, the Finnish adaptation of the reality competition show Clash of the Choirs, always had a choir led by a metal singer. I was super invested in season 2 because Marco Hietala's choir came in second. Speaking of Marco, Anthony Bourdain did a No Reservations episode in Helsinki, and at least one woman he was talking to had a tarot t-shirt on. I think this was filmed right after Gravity of Light released. I can cherry pick lots and lots of metal moments from Finnish pop culture, definitely more than I can for any other place, but it does come down to it being a small country, around 5.5 million people. These charts are determined by thousands or even hundreds of sales at that scale. If you just look at stats, Finland enjoys pop, rap, and rock as much as anyone else. They enjoy their homegrown pop stars and imports from the UK, US, and mainland Europe, too. This reflects most of the album chart and definitely the Violinen Singolista, the top songs for the country. Metal is better at pushing albums out as singles, and that's why your friends always pick the driving playlists instead. And I think I have a duty to wide-eyed young metalheads to say that, yes, I did want to move to Finland when I was your age. Escape isn't just metaphorical in this episode. I have my reasons to be vague about what was haunting me and still does, but I thought I had to get as far away from that as I could tolerate. And, well, I didn't name this podcast after a Finnish lake near my house, so you can see where that led to. But even without that motivation, it's easy to dream up this magical winter wonderland full of hot, elf-like metalheads and their magical mother tongue that lands in your ears like a snowflake. You hear the real stats, too. Finland hits the top of the list for education quality, healthcare, happiness. It has a state religion, but it is a largely irreligious society. And of course, Finns love to drink, and that sounded fun once to me too. But Finland is a real place. It's a real country sitting on the Baltic Sea with a high suicide rate, warm summers, insipid pop music, and even ugly people. It's a country that's notoriously hard to immigrate to with an extremely difficult language to learn. I'm not here to discourage migration to Finland. It's a beautiful, unique country. I'm giving advice I wish I heard before I pinned all my hopes and dreams on a plan that can never come to fruition for me. Other people are going to have better reasons to move than I once thought I did. Family, relationships, school, work, even just a deep interest in Finland. I don't even think I had a plan for attending university in Finland, let alone finding work. It was a half-baked idea, so of course I never went. I have no ties to the country. I'm not of Finnish descent at all. My interest is very surface level. I just thought I'd be in the promised land of heavy metal. I'm stubborn, and I like the routine I set for myself in Massachusetts. I'm really bad with learning languages in general, so Finnish felt extra impossible, and I gave up real quickly. Now I'm 30 with a pension plan that won't transfer out of state, let alone internationally. So, visit first. I still want to spend 2 weeks in Finland. One summer min-maxing my schedule for as many rock and metal festivals as I can tolerate. I can accept that if I'm also happy with where I'm living. I am now, even if it took until my 30s to get there. I'm still surrounded by metal and challenging myself even in ways that a teenage Theo wouldn't have considered a possibility.